Hello again. People seem to like the last video where I kit bashed the gue'vesa model, so I'm doing a follow-up video on how I paint them in a Tau sept color scheme. It's a similar story as before. I have a Tau torso and a backpack. Legs are a recast mix of Tau and Shock Trooper legs. He has a Tau shoulder pad, Shock Trooper arms holding a plasma gun, and the shock trooper head with the Aquila script off. To hide some seam lines around the legs, I also have some crude knives and ammo on the sides. I prime my minis blue since I'm mainly focused on painting ultramarines right now, but this isn't the actual color I want. If you've seen any videos on how people paint yellow miniatures, the trick is usually to use a pink and white undercoat so that the yellows are bright enough. I'm not actually planning on using any contrast paints for the important parts of the model, but even the regular Tau light ochre has a pretty big difference based on the undercoat. So at the very least, you need a white undercoat. The first actual color after all of the prep work is Tau light ochre. This goes over all of the armor panels, the backpack, the helmet, and depending on the weapon it could also go over that. Next, I take some Army Painter Burning Ore and thin it down a bit with the Warpaint Stabilizer. This once again goes over all of the yellow areas, but mostly in the crevices and the undersides. This is one of the more tedious parts of the paint job. If you want to save time, you can just go over everything with the Yantian Yellow contrast paint, but I find that I have a lot less control that way. This kind of works as a glaze, so you will probably have to do two coats to get the proper depth. After that, I've got ice yellow, once again thinned down a bit with the stabilizer. This goes on all the shiny parts of the armor panels and as a highlight on most of the edges. This is especially important for the leg armor panels, since the washes and the shades there will eventually make them lose some of the details. Next up is all of the cloth. I use Vallejo German Camel Medium Brown, but you can use pretty much any other dark browns here. You could also go with beige instead of the browns, since that's kind of inherited from the guard models themselves. But for the Tau ones, I usually just go with all brown for the cloth. I use matte black for the shoes, the helmet strap, and the goggles, and for other minor details like these grenades, ammo packs, and the gun itself. The only other kind of brown here is Doombow brown. It's only for the strap holding the gun. For the Tau symbol on the shoulder, I use any kind of silver or iron looking metallics. Traditionally, you're supposed to do it black with thin white lines in the details, but I find that too difficult. I also use these metallics for the knives. For the base coat for any skin, I use barbarian flesh. For gue'vesa, you're mostly limited to the face and hands, even less so on this one since he has goggles and a glove on one hand. And I cheat a bit and use snakebite leather for the pouches, since it's again different enough from the cloth and it's pretty quick. Now another tedious part. With my smallest brush I have to go through all of the armor panel lines and any crevices with a strong tone. Or you can use Agrax Earth Shade, but I find that that one stains a bit too much. I try to avoid washing all over the entire model, since then the yellows would lose a lot of their brightness. I know I already did some work with ice yellows on the highlights, but after all of the other base coats and shade paints, the highlights don't seem that crisp anymore. So once again I use ice yellow, but this time with no thinning. I just go over the raised parts of the edges, so not the entire edge, but just part of it. Another quick cheat for the skin is the strong skin tone, or if you're using stereo paints, you could use like Gillivan Flesh Shade. If this was a Space Marine, I could try and manually do all the layering on the face, but with these modern guard models, they're too small and I can't get in there with a small brush. It messes things up. So I just wash them and then eventually correct any spills with a small touch of highlighting. For the cloth highlights, I use fur brown, and later on I mix a bit of Dorado skin into it for a second thinner run. This mostly just tries to follow the creases on the cloth. If you find that you're having trouble following the lines, you can also just stipple the highlights on. It kind of becomes like a camo effect. Next highlights are the black areas. I do those with Night Sky. As I mentioned, for skin highlights, I just use a bit of Dorado skin. A bit of prep work for all of the glowing areas. I go over them with matte white, the goggles too, since they're supposed to be kind of glass and glass is usually blue. This is a bit out of the expected order, but I go over all of the cloth with strong tone, kind of blends all of the browns together. I also use it as a wash for the metallics. Similarly, I use dark tone on the black areas. It kind of blends the black and the night sky highlights. And the quick way I do glowing weapons is just going over them with a very vibrant speed paint, like magic blue. I also use it for the goggles. And at this point the model was more or less good enough, but I wanted to go for an OSL effect, which may or may not have ruined the model. I tried doing it quick and easy and just dry brush tempo guard blue around the gun and a bit on the armor, but the dry brush couldn't cleanly handle the weapon strap, so after that I had to start glazing the blue on with a normal brush. But eventually I also started mixing white into the blue, used that for edge highlights, and it kind of worked. The dry brush kind of took out a bit of the work that I had done with the speed paint, so I also went over with watered down white on all of the lower edges of the plasma itself. For the base I'm not doing anything particularly special. I already have texture paint onto it, so I just repaint it with a mix of browns, and then I dry brush it with some kind of yellow or ochre or something bright. To go with the desert color scheme, I also paint the base rim brown, and finally I cover the base with Seraphim Sepia. And that's the model. As I mentioned, you could also go for beige on the clothing. If you're using the other tau shoulder pad, I usually paint the middle portion of it with a very bright blue going into a white gradient. But other than that, this is generally how I paint the gue'vesa and most of my other tau models.